Join us for the Criterion Institute podcast as Joy Anderson, a global thought leader in business and social change, leads us through a series of discussions, interviews, frameworks, rants, and reframes that will help you better understand how to use finance as a tool for transformative systems change.
I am Joy Anderson, and this is the Criterion Institute podcast. Today, I want to start with something that sounds simple, but changes everything: trust. Because in finance, we often talk about capital, risk, collateral, and growth. But what Adeshina Adewumi has built through Trade Lenda makes a much deeper point: that real economic progress doesn't start with money alone, doesn't start with capital. It starts with understanding how people actually live, trade, save, and support each other. What I love about Ade's approach is that he doesn't treat informal markets like a problem to be fixed. He treats them like a system to be understood. That means seeing the full value chain, from farmer to aggregator to producer to distributor. And by building finance that fits the way communities already work. Not just the biggest businesses at the top, but the everyday businesses that keep food moving, jobs growing, and local economies alive. And that's where this conversation gets so interesting. Ade is not just talking about access to finance. He's talking about access to dignity, access to structures that support informality, access to a system that people can actually trust. He's showing what happens when financial tools are designed around real people, real relationships, and real market behavior. So in this conversation, we're going to explore how trust becomes infrastructure, why supply chains matter more than we often admit, and how finance can move from being a burden to becoming a lever for shared prosperity. Enjoy. Ade, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm obsessed with trade finance. Maybe not as much as holding companies. Those are my two favorite things in finance, but I'm pretty fond of trade finance. Quick story. I went to Hong Kong and I was being hosted by the State Department, the US State Department in Hong Kong. And all I wanted them to do was to take me to the big wall of buildings where all the trade finance happens across Asia. There's like this wall of buildings. I was like, that's where it all happens. Because I think the thing that people forget when they get all obsessed with venture capital or enterprise finance, that's like, I finance the growth of this economy by giving money to these companies, is the companies need a market. They need trade. They need a whole infrastructure and ecosystem to be able to do the thing that they do, which is why I love what you've built at Trade Lenda, just because it looks at that question of not just the shiny toy in the middle, but all the messy bits that make trade happen. So I don't know, maybe just start and walk through how it works, because it's so cool.
Thank you very much. I think I would like to start by the fact that in as much as the wealth of the nations are measured by how much trade they can perform, we can bring it home by saying that the wealth of any organization is actually measured by how much they can actually trade. And that is really why trade financing is very important. And if you bring it a bit lower end to the people,
Yeah.
Buying and selling has been even from time immemorial. So it simply means that people must trade, and it's a very integral part of our lives. So basically, Trade Lender was formed to be able to bridge this supply chain, because once we can bridge the supply chain, then we can have a bit of stability and also be on track towards shared economic prosperity. And then we trickled it down a bit to saying, okay, how can we maximize this supply chain?
Mm,
Can we focus on performing sectors? So we're very, very picky as regards to the key performing sectors, the sectors that actually shape and catalyze or crystallizes every economy. If you want people to be able to eradicate poverty, if you want people to be able to have zero hunger, if you want people to be able to create jobs, meaningful, dignifying jobs, you must be able to focus on some specific performing sectors. Those sectors are sectors that cannot um, fail, unless even when they are disasters, they're very important to that relevance of human life. One of it is agriculture.
right, right,
The other is actually retail. The other is other services which you can call as general services, which are also closely related to driving the agriculture and the retail space. We call it FMCG in terms of the retail space, so fast moving consumer goods. And for us, we are very particular about that. So how do we support the farmer, with the various supplies, whether it's in form of input financing or asset financing, that can help them sustain that farmland and increase their yield, and then how can we then support that aggregator who will then in turn mop up this product from the farmer, take it to those that actually needs to produce. And then how can we support these producers, so that they can actually produce and retain their staffs, so they need working capital to be able to continue to produce. And then now, when they produce, they need distributors. And because they've invested so much in production, they would always tell the distributors, come and take from me, or I'm going to pay you for 5 days, or I'm going to supply you, I'm going to do this. Or they actually also need the aggregators to supply them those products and say, oh, I'm going to pay you in 45 days or in 60 days or in
right.
90 days. And that is really where we come in. And that is what really bettered Trade Lenda. One thing we then discovered is down that funnel, a whole lot of people don't have collateral. In the Western world, it's easy for people to be able to build credit quite easily. But when you look at it in most sub-Saharan Africa, is quite difficult for most people, especially who were not born into wealthy homes, to actually have collateral. Even those that are actually from wealthy homes, most of them don't have credit histories. Some of them are first-time borrowers. How do you help them to be inclusive? And then when you look at the demographics also, you also have if some form of people, or not form of people, but basically people who, because of alienation or inclination, they can't get interest-based facilities.
Right, right.
So we then decided to build something that can work for both interest-based and non-interest-based, customers, users. So today on Trade Lender, both those that are looking for credit, finance, that can scale their business growth, whether it's a farmer, whether it's a producer, whether it's a distributor, to be able to scale without actually looking off their shoulders or having a rich uncle or auntie, can actually come on our platform and bank with us, get bank account assigned to them, and get access to finance without knowing me, without knowing anybody. That's really what we do.
You're so cool. So I think there's a couple things that, from my perspective, everybody at Criterion who's met you just loves all the different little places that you see, like you look, like you actually notice things at it. That's what what I notice about you is how much you notice things. And this isn't working and that's not working and we could just do that differently, and why don't I build a structure that lets us do that? And so starting with, the role of Islamic finance and sort of the barriers of Sharia compliance and how to live out a certain way of being, but also to be a woman in the middle of a supply chain who doesn't necessarily have control of her family's assets and therefore doesn't have the collateral that lets this all happen. And people name those problems and then step away, but you flip that. You step in because it is, and I think it's so right to start. You're starting in sectors where jobs are going to be created that are necessary for life. They are not lifestyle choices. They are, I need to be able to buy goods, eat food, no matter what. It's not going to go out of style. But in the middle, so you go from end to end, and we can keep breaking that down, right? You go from the farmer who's picking the food, managing the livestock or whatever it is, the farmer who is creating food, all the way through to somebody who's exporting or distributing more. So you go end to end, and you do that because of speed, right? Like your distinctiveness in the middle, and then maybe unpack this for me because I think it's so cool. Your ability to make that happen is the turnover rate, right? Because you're not big tickets, right? We're like, I can't do that because they don't need $25 million or $35 million. And you're like, great, but they need this amount for a shorter period of time. The speed, the velocity by which the capital moves allows you to make money on the money and have a sustainable business. Did I get that right?
That's correct. Absolutely correct.
What makes you able to do the speed pit? Like, what did you figure out to be able to manage the speed?
So first for my mom, at, at an early age of 7, I watched her do business. I also did business. In fact, my undergraduate, I actually lived by doing business. So I went through undergraduate studies by doing business. I made money. I also created job on campus for my fellow students. I had distributors all over campus. That kind of helped me to make money that saw me through my undergraduate studies. And I did not maybe finish with a pass. I still finished with a first class, honors. So in Nigeria we call it first class, but in across the world they call it honors, right?
Right.
So I still finished with the honors, which is the peak of my studies, and I saw how that turnover could actually be very critical,
Hmm.
because most often times these sectors that we're talking about that is performing, the margins are tiny,
Yep.
very tiny. So oftentimes when we think is the opposite and we fund the larger tickets,
Hmm.
by the time it moves from the farmer, the margin from the farmer can be 30%. By the time it moves to the aggregator, the margin has moved to 10%. By the time it moves to the producer, the manufacturer, it has gone from 10% to 5%. By the time it goes to the distributor and the retailer, it has actually gone to 2%, or at max 2 to 7%.
Margin back to who?
Margin from the where it came from, who is the farmer, down to the end consumer. The
Yep.
margin still out.
Right.
So when you don't support and finance end to end, and you focus on just the larger tickets, there's little to which you can make.
Hmm.
And any business mistake, any miscalculated decisions would kill your portfolio. So it's just like investment, right? So the investment vehicles basically are designed to invest at the top. But what margins do you get at the top compared to somebody who actually planted the cocoa, or maybe planted the cassava, or any other crop, right? The margins are usually much more wider at that level.
Hmm.
So if you support through the value chain of that end with the bigger ticket, and you consolidate end to end, you are actually able to harness the beauty of the consolidation. So one end is not holding on to the majority of your funds. You have a diverse portfolio, which is healthy.
So instead of diversifying across a few different value chains to say, I don't want to be just in cassava or just, so I will take a slice of several different value chains, and I will finance distribution, or I'll finance the brand that's selling it, but I'm not going to finance the underlying mechanics that actually move the capital. You diversify within a value chain so that you can capture the whole benefit and diversify the risks.
That's correct. And it also allows you to also have deeper understanding of the market. So it gives us deeper understanding of knowing that what are the associated risks. What if somebody comes to me now and is saying, "Oh, I need XYZ amount of money for this particular place," the questions I'm going to ask is going to be different from the questions that somebody who is just at that top level is asking, because I have seen the challenges of insecurity that can happen with the farmer. I've
Yep.
also seen the logistic hurdles that happens with the aggregator. I've also seen the power issues that can happen in terms of power supply, that can happen with the manufacturer. So if that is not all factored into the feasibility study, then I won't be financing that larger ticket if I am financing that larger ticket.
Right.
I think that is really one thing that has helped me. And also, the beauty of it is that someone who has also been financed from that farmer level, who have now grown up to become an aggregator and gone upward, understands and has links to maximize profit. So the beauty of it is the person is not speaking theoretical, the person has experienced it and has grown. For practical example, I'm going to use a particular business that we support. They started out first with just one distribution channel, and then they grew to five within a span of about 5 years.
What was the product?
So they are actually into agriculture and also production.
Mm.
So they started out first with greenhouse farming,
Mm.
and then they grew it into different locations. But they started out with just one piece of greenhouse farm, right?
Right.
And then with one piece of greenhouse farm, they were supplying from Plateau State to Lagos. So they had their farm. It was like pepper, the normal greenhouse farming, so they plant it, they build on it, and then over time they built it from one and then into multiple branches. So now today on just one outlet, they have about close to like 10, pens, so but that did not happen overnight. That started with just one, right? And then the length, the fade in the process, it was easy to manage the risks.
Right.
But what you would see is those that come most often times for the larger tickets, they've not farmed even one thing before,
Wow.
but they have good degrees. They have good degrees. They can speak Queen's English.
Right.
Again, no offense to anybody listening to this that can speak Queen's English.
Well, I mean,
But
Queen, but I don't know if Queen's English actually helps you as a farmer. I'm not sure that's the skill set that we need.
yeah, but if you look at it, those people who actually like get their hands dirty oftentimes don't even know how to present the business case to those who are able to give the bigger tickets. And that is sometimes even the reason why they are not even funded in the first place.
Right.
And I've seen tons of these businesses that by just supporting them, they now have distribution. I have a specific lady that I know that from 2023 till now, she has grown distribution to almost close to 150 outlets, you know. And apart from that, she actually has also been able to get her product into different markets. So aside from Nigeria, her products are in the United Kingdom, her products are in Canada, her products are in different states. She started out first trying out different things, producing, she produces yaji, which you call pepper. So grinds the pepper, you call it
Yep.
yaji, and then turns it there. And then she tried out a bit of hibiscus flower also, and then turned it into wine bottle, like properly, like proper wine. And now those products are actually making it to different corners of the world. She basically started small. In fact, for her, she typically did not really need so much financing. She just needed knowledge.
Yeah.
Yes, we did give her finance, but the knowledge that she had, she was now able to use that knowledge to actually raise much more bigger tickets
Right.
from within a circle, because she could now talk about her business better. She could now present a business better. She went on trainings courtesy of some of our partners, that we worked with. She actually went on a training abroad and came back, and all those learnings, she kind of loaded it into the business. And today she's doing amazingly well. A lot of them that we've supported through some of these programs that we've done outside of just providing finance for them.
One of the things that, particularly in the last couple of years, working in the MasterCard Foundation African Growth Fund, but even more working with folks like you as part of this broader program of people looking at market access, it's this sort of drumbeat of, sure, we can look at the, as you call it, the big ticket, right? We can look at the companies that we think are going to grow, whether they're gazelles or unicorns. I don't care what you're going to call them, but at some point, they're the ones that you think can have high growth. But those companies rely on an ecosystem of trade around them. They require regulatory frameworks that actually support their ability to trade. And they actually need functioning supply chains that are stable. And I think what you keep naming in this end-to-end piece is what creates stability. Because you're not saying, I only care about this one slice of the supply chain, and back to the boots on the ground of the people who are actually farming the goods. They don't matter anymore because I'm upstream and I care what's happening here. But you stay connected across the value chain. And in that, it means that you have to stay able to address informality, because you're not going to have the same level of formalization, right? Eventually, the woman who's producing the incredible hibiscus products, they're going to be a more formal business. They're going to be in more formal trade outlets, but they're also still connected to the informal farmer. And if we don't have that all make sense, then we end up with things like plantations and other things that are, well, what you call evil, right? The kind of, we end up in places where the power dynamics mean that only some people can make it. So what do you do to keep that informality? I mean, we think about it as how you create structures that support informality, because informality by itself is really hard. You're just subsistence, you're making it work on your own. But the kind of structures that you provide that support informality, how do those work?
All right. So for us, access to finance is just one arm of it. We know it takes a village to actually build a community, and like you mentioned, those with the bigger tickets also need that framework, that system to actually hold them. It's just like building a house. You need the foundation to be strong.
Right.
If you focus so much on the roof and all that, the house would collapse at the end of the day. So what we have been doing since we started is not just providing access to finance. We are also quite heavy in terms of what some people will call capitalization, capacity building, or we call it SME clinics, which actually connects these people with experts who can actually support their business and move them to transition from informal to actually formal. Because what we call informal is just the way the people are used to doing it.
Hmm.
The former is the way we expect them to do it.
Okay.
The difference oftentimes is just a little bit of adopting a new style to it. So we talk about savings, in a bank and all that. People have been saving since, before I was even born, right? In Africa, they call it ajo, whereby, you save together, and then one person takes the whole money for this month, goes to grow his business or her business, and then the other person takes the next month, like that.
Right.
But when when talk about formalizing it, is just moving them from that system and saying, see, let's have a transparent system that can actually everybody can see where the money is going to, how the money is being deployed, who keeps the money, whether or not somebody is deducting from the money or something like that. So the process of actually moving from informal to formal is quite thin. So with capacity development programs and
Hmm.
initiatives, with business development programs, which we are quite invested in for these businesses, farmers that we support. We have seen most of them transit from just that seemingly small business to actually becoming a bit more adaptive to farmer. Some of the things we even saw through the WIF project recently is some farmers actually don't have NIN, so they don't have like a national identity number.
Yep.
So oftentimes they use their friends and family's number, to be able to get into the program. But now with programs that actually are able to inculcate these initiatives of supporting them to move from informal to formal, we are now able to work with different parastatals to actually train them, onboard them on those identity verification systems, which now moves them into that pool. And once they also get their first access to finance,
Right.
they are now captured into the formal system, even though we still call them informal, right? But their data has actually been captured into the formal system.
Why do we still call them informal then? If they're participating in some way in a formal system, or is it just because of the status of their registration, or is that their own identity, or the categories of how we define informal versus formal?
Yeah, I think it's really the way we define informal versus formal. Also, the way they are used to doing things. They still do
Hmm.
things in clusters. But the reality is they are also actively now engaging in some form of formal,
Right.
access to finance or the other.
And that's in some ways what Trade Lenda's done then is build out that platform that would be trusted in that community, right? So that they're not going off to a random bank and putting their money someplace where they don't trust, where they can't see their neighbors, where they aren't operating as a community anymore. You've just formalized what was an informal savings group and given them a transparent place to put that money and move it and distribute it and move it around. Am I
That's correct.
Maybe if you could think of one other story that names a power dynamic that you saw that you addressed. Because I think this is what I love about what you do, right? You look, you actually see, and then you design the finance systems that allow people access to finance or access to the kind of finance that would actually help them. There's a lot of people who provide access to finance that stuff that's actually in the end money with terms that moves them away from what actually makes them successful, as opposed to deepens the commitments that a community has to each other. You could move an individual away from that, or you could move the community closer together with more accountability and a structure that supports. So, one other story of a cool power dynamic that you've disrupted?
Yeah, so I'm going to use Lagos for example. In Lagos, you have, and this is actually across Nigeria, you have different clusters of um, markets, into different clusters that then has different members in those markets. They pay dues, they meet every week to talk about the challenges that they face, as well as also try to encourage themselves on how to continue to grow the business forward. There's this specific market in Lagos, it's called Show Market. When we went into Show, we had just one specific client in Show Market. And then over the years, I think since about 2022, we've seen this one point of contact actually introduce us to the market formation, and with this introduction to the market formation we've been able to support more business owners within that same market. But the beauty of it is that one person not paying back actually rubs off on the others, because the referral system that we've been able to maximize is actually that one person who has taken from us refers the other party.
Right.
And it simply means that the other party who is being referred is also accountable to ensuring that they repay back so that it does not affect the other community members. On a particular occasion, there was this particular woman who couldn't pay. And this actually lingered for, I think, a couple of months, almost close, I think maybe 6 or 9 months. She couldn't pay. But what we saw was that even though she couldn't pay, there were a whole lot of support systems from that market, community for her. And, we were not really, afraid that our money was lost. The beauty of it is that even though she couldn't pay for some certain months, when her business actually bounced back, she was able to repay back all the money. In fact, she paid it all at once. She didn't, the whole money she didn't pay for like 9 months, 6 to 9 months. I'm not so specific about the exact month. She was able to, pay off everything all at once.
Wow.
Now, one culture shift that I'm really trying to point out is the typical traditional system doesn't care what really happened to that particular woman. All they want is their money. It's fine because they're also not a charity organization, right? It's fair. But the reality is, what footprint does that leave with that woman? If you are putting so much pressure, and like I said, we support performing sectors. So it's either something out of control went wrong, or it was just, her being dishonest. But once you can actually have a system that can capture whether or not, she was dishonest, maybe she diverted the funds, or she actually did not divert the funds. And that's one thing that we have been able to use to keep our non performing loans very low. In her own case, she actually did not divert the funds, right? It's just that she needed, things went out of her control, and then she made mistakes, which is fine. It's part of the curve, right?
Right.
And then now she has learned with restructuring of that loan portfolio, she's able to over time pay back. And we've seen this over and over from even those that are in the manufacturing space, whereby somebody had a couple of millions in Naira, that's like some couple of thousands of dollars in terms of loans. And then we made it that all the person needed to pay every week was just $100. And then over a period of time, the person clears out the loan. The person still retains the fact that a loan is not a trap. Because that's also one thing in this part of the world that people say, oh, if I take this money from these people, I'm not going to have peace of mind.
Right.
So they would rather remain small and informal than actually go for the formal credit.
Right.
Because they don't want to be harassed. They don't want to be, looked down upon by their peers, or that pressure that comes with getting formal credit, or maybe their property is being taken for those that even have properties, right?
Right.
So, once they know that this financial partner is ethical, also has them in mind, and obviously it's not a case of diversion, because that is very key for us. And that's why even at that down level, we try as much as possible to avoid them getting cash. Instead, they get the direct input that they need, because
Right.
this is the first credit that they are getting. So we would rather expose them in a gradual way, whereby if what they need is actually an asset, they get the asset. If what they need is actually input, they get the input. So there's no risks of diversion.
Right.
But if there's no, need for them to get the working capital in form of cash, we can then provide that progressively for them. So they're able to remove that label that comes with, I'm in debt.
Yeah.
I can't pay. My creditor, my debtor, like all this kind of stuff. They're able to remove that label that comes with it, and they now see access to capital as some form of leverage that
Yep.
they can actually harness, in growing and sustaining their business and their communities.
Leverage that they can use versus leverage over them, which is so often what it ends up being, over their lives, over their families, over their homes.
That's correct.
One of the truths of finance at some level is that capital moves at the speed of trust. But what you figured out how to do, Ade, is to actually start with how the community operates and to start with trust. And if you start with trust, you can actually build financial markets that have velocity, versus if you start with distrust, it means everything that you do in the beginning is about control versus about facilitating based on a place of trust. And whether it starts from, I'm going to give you the inputs, not the cash at the first level. I'm going to be aware that Islamic law in your life means that you don't actually want a loan. I'll figure out how to have it not be a loan. To then I'll see the community that you're operating in and figure out how to embed myself as useful in a community that's already formed. All of those things mean that trust isn't slowing you down, it's speeding you up, because you're creating the systems that reflect what people see, what they see in their informal choice, what they chose to be informal in many ways, because they didn't want to be controlled by a bigger system. But if you can create a system that they trust, whereby you can trust them, you can build a different kind of market.
Perfectly said. Let me put it this way. Let me just break it down on how the informal sector works. I have you as my friend. I come to you. I say, "Oh, give me money.
Yeah.
You know me. You know my house. You know my children.
Yep.
You give me the money because you know my children. Because you know my house. I'm going to give you back that money."
Yep.
But if you take that same money from somebody that doesn't know your children, you don't have any emotional connections to the person, so you just
Right.
you can afford to.
Yeah.
So everything you've said is just hitting the nail on the head, that we're not changing anything. We're just making them now see us as their friends. And when they can't pay back, they know that if we are their friends, they should be able to tell us what happened.
Yep.
Unless there's actually a place of them being dishonest. And in such cases, we will still get back our money.
You'll track it down because you know the
Yeah, why
community.
it's not coming to us?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I love what you've built, Ade. I just think it's cool, and there's so many lessons to take away from it about how we can support a different kind of market, because markets are built on how to manage trust at a distance, but too much of that gets sanitized and only is about one side of the transaction trusting. And so that you have to look like me and act like me for me to be able to trust you, versus we understand how you act together, and then we'll create the systems that allow you to be yourselves and be fully vibrant supply chains that actually lead to, economies that function without changing the basic unit of family, of community, of that connection that makes most of these markets work. A pleasure always to talk to you, Ade.
Thank you very much, Joy. Thank you for this platform.
At Criterion Institute, our partners understand that shifting deeply entrenched power dynamics can't be done with a single training session or report. Our most successful engagements have spanned years, not months, and involve close collaboration within one of our 6 systems change approaches. We're currently in the midst of advancing some remarkable change around how power is seen and addressed in our financial systems. We hope our work sparks your thinking about what might be possible together, and we invite you to have a further conversation about how the change we are creating today aligns with your impact goals.
To learn more about our work, visit us at criterioninstitute.org. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews help our podcast reach a wider audience. Thanks for listening.